It's Part 64 guy. It's May in New England, which means it's the start of lawn mowing season. What I'd like to do in this video is just show a couple of quick things that you can do to check and make sure that your lawnmower is ready to run so that you can get a good, reliable lawn mowing season out of it.
Most lawnmowers are very simple in concept. They typically consist of a single-cylinder engine in the 3 to 6 horsepower range. Attached to the crankshaft is a single steel blade. As the engine rotates close to 3,000 RPM on most models, the blade tips rotate close to 200 miles per hour. At speeds much faster than that, there is a risk of a foreign object such as a rock or pieces of a broken blade breaking through the steel mower deck and causing severe personal injury. In any case, the preset speed is typically enough to slice through the thin blades of grass. A sharp blade is also important as it is healthier to slice the tips of the grass rather than shred them, which is what would happen with a dull blade. Let's start with a quick lesson in how your small engine works. Typically, the engine used on larger pieces of equipment like lawnmowers and tractors are of the 4-cycle variety. This means there are 4 distinct cycles to the operation of the engine. First, the intake cycle happens when the piston moves down, creating a vacuum in the cylinder. At the same time, the intake valve opens, allowing the air-fuel mixture to be drawn from the carburetor into the cylinder. At the bottom of the piston stroke, the intake valve closes and the compression stroke begins. As the piston moves up, the air-fuel mixture is compressed, greatly increasing the pressure and fuel vapor concentration. Close to the top of the piston stroke, a magnet mounted to the flywheel is rotating past the ignition coil. The movement of the magnet generates a voltage in the coil which can reach levels of 20 to 30,000 volts. The voltage is conducted through the ignition cable and into the spark plug, where it jumps across the small gap in the end of the plug. When this spark occurs inside the cylinder with that air-fuel mixture, it ignites it and causes an explosion. The explosion forces the piston downward in what is called the power stroke. As the piston reaches the bottom of the power stroke, the exhaust valve opens, allowing the burned air-fuel mixture to exit the cylinder by way of the muffler as the piston moves upward. The whole process then repeats. Now let's review the basic components of a typical small engine application. You're going to start with the air cleaner. This is going to filter out any contaminants like grass clippings and dust so they don't get into the engine and mess it up. You have a carburetor right here. This is actually connected to a butterfly valve inside of the passage here, and that is what's going to regulate the amount of air fuel mixture that actually gets into the engine. Spark plug and cylinder head. Coming off the other side of the cylinder is the muffler. Underneath here is a recoil starter. So what this is a clutch. When you pull on the rope, it will engage the flywheel and spin the engine to get it started. A lot of lawnmowers have a handle that you have to squeeze in order to run the engine. What that does is when you squeeze the handle, it disengages a brake mechanism that's in here so the flywheel can spin freely. It also will make an electrical connection for the ignition so that the engine can actually make spark and be able to run. This particular model of lawnmower has the fuel on this side. It's actually built in. Fill for the fuel, fill for the gasoline, and then the oil, which is actually a dipstick style. This oil fill consists of a small fill cap where the oil level is assessed by visually inspecting how close the level of oil is to the top of a threaded fill tube. And you should find this kind of information, a model, a type, a code, and that will give you the information you need if you don't happen to have the user manual for your equipment. So to remove the air cleaner on this model, it's one screw. This pivots down. And this is a dry type air cleaner, so it's just a corrugated paper element.
I didn't buy a new one yet, so just for sake of instruction, take the old one out, put the new one in. While you're at it, check in here, just make sure there's no, damage or other gunk in it that you need to clean out. Pivot the holder back up, and secure the screw. Next thing we'll check is the spark plug. So here's the wire coming down. You can see based on the age there's a little bit of cracking. It's normal. If it gets bad enough, then it would need to be replaced, but this is okay. The spark plug here has a connector on it like that. Some may have a protective boot, some may not. And use the appropriate size socket. So we'll just clean this very gently with this is a brass bristled brush. Most times you don't have to clean this, but I'm going to do it anyway just to show you that if you do have a lot of junk on there, you can clean it up. The spark jumps across this gap when engine ignition is required. This gap has to be the proper amount or else the engine will not run properly. To check that, use what's called a feeler gauge. And you can see here that this one is 30 thousandths of an inch, which matches the information in the manual. So to check the gap, just gently slide the gauge into the gap, and you should have some resistance. If it won't go at all, then the gap is too small. If it gives you a little bit of resistance, then the gap is just right. If it's too big and it slides in too easily, you can use the features of the gauge to bend the electrode, so that way you can then set the gap properly. To install the spark plug, just line it up, snug it down, and we're going to use a torque wrench. Now, according to the manual for this engine, we need 15 foot-pounds, or about 180 inch-pounds. Now, if you don't have a torque wrench, you can use a regular wrench, and you may just have to do some math. The length of this wrench is 6 inches. So if we look at the torque, if we put 30 pounds of pressure 6 inches out, that's 15 foot-pounds of torque. It's beneficial to give a visual inspection to the carburetor. Look for dripping fuel, excessive dirt. You want to make sure that things are relatively clean and that there's no signs of damage. On this particular model, you can see the throttle is actually an automatic type of mechanism. There is no throttle control on this model lawnmower. Once you start it, it just runs in fast mode all the time. So in this case, if you look at the Predator engine that's on my leaf blower from my other project, you'll see that there is a lever here that adjusts the throttle. And what that does is moves a series of levers and springs that will adjust the carburetor valve that determines how much of the air-fuel mixture actually makes it into the engine. Okay, so let's inspect underneath. Get some of this stuff off. not going to be overly picky about this just because of its... one, I'm being a little lazy. And I've got kind of a time crunch to get this done. Actually, crankshaft looks okay. So this is the shaft adapter. This had cracked when the previous owner had hit a rock. Blade's a little dull. So the goal of sharpening is to just kind of restore this edge. You can see it's kind of rounded. Got a few nicks here and there. So I'm going to run the grinder just along this edge to restore that edge, to restore the sharpness. And don't forget, safety goggles, safety glasses. Pretty bad nick there, so I'm thinking this might be the last season for this blade. And we'll check balance using a balancer. It's basically just a cone that sits on a point, and then if the blade is roughly the same distance. Unfortunately this one here, because it's this funky star mount, it doesn't really sit perfect on the balancer, so playing around a little bit, and I got it to be, it looks like it's centered on there, and it's roughly even, so I think we're okay. Make sure that the key lines up with the keyway on the crankshaft. Make sure that the keyway on the blade, or make sure that the star pattern on the blade lines up. And mind you, different lawnmowers may have different blade mounting methods or patterns. So this is just to serve as a guide as to what to do. Definitely take a look at the owner manual for your specific equipment. I'm just going to give this a few pounds of torque there to tighten it. Be careful not to grab the blade here that is now sharp. Don't want to cut your hand. Okay, so to check the oil, take out the dipstick and wipe it. It's just in case from moving the engine around, you splash the oil around and it can give you a false reading. So now we'll take it out, look. And we can see that the oil is down into the lower part of the hashed area here, which means I need to add some. Make sure to not get the dipstick into anything dirty. You don't want to put dirt and contaminants into the crankcase. I'm just going to add a little bit. It's always easier to add a little at a time than to realize you added too much. Now you have to try and drain it out. Perfect. We're also going to visually inspect the starter rope. We want to make sure that this isn't showing signs of fraying or damage, that if you go to pull this, it snaps, recoils inside here, and that is a major pain in the you-know-where to repair. There's a very high tension spring in here that can really wreck things if it goes wacko if you try to take it apart, and it flies out. So we try to avoid doing that. I've done it, it's not fun. So we check that. Another thing to check is the safety mechanism. This is a brake that does two things. It cuts the ignition to the engine to stop it, but also engages a brake. You can see this lever right here. When this lever is in this position, it engages a brake onto the flywheel to stop it. So when you release that handle, it stops the engine as quickly as possible. It's a safety mechanism. Do not disable those, because if something were to happen, you were to trip on a hill and the lawnmower were to back up over you, you want that blade to be stopped by the time it hits you. So one way to check this is if you pull the handle with it engaged, it's almost impossible. It's really taking a lot of force to try and turn that. Whereas with this is, with it engaged, it spins relatively easily. So that's a good sign to know that the brake is working. When that's done, reattach the spark plug wire. Let's give it a shot. Alright, so before we fire this up, I'm going to do a final check. We did the spark plug, did the air filter, checked oil, checked, cleaned, and sharpened the blade. Put gas in it. According to this model, there's a primer bulb on the carburetor. It helps kind of push some extra fuel in there to help you get it started, especially if it's cold. So it says push 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Grab the safety handle, disengage the brake. What I was doing was just checking for excessive vibration. That's another sign that the blade might be out of balance. You do not want to run with an out of balance blade. It could lead to failure of the crankshaft. It could lead to failure of the blade. And you don't want to have pieces of metal flying out from under this thing when your feet are right behind it. That could cause severe injury. Notice that when I shut the engine off, it stopped very quickly. That's the brake engaging to stop the engine from rotating. That was obviously working. So we're ready to go. So thank you very much for watching this video. I especially want to give a thanks to Jeff in New York, who made the request for this project, which is to tune up a lawnmower for the upcoming season. And if you like what you see and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, and I will get more videos out to you. If you have a request or you'd like to see a different project, throw me a request down in one of the comments, and I'll see what I can do to get it to you. So again, thank you for watching this Part 64 guy. See you later.